What's up, everybody, and good morning. On a day where I planned to talk about something else, we're still going to do Murdoch, as a lot of that stuff that came out yesterday is pretty wild to see lawyers and clients trying to go back on things that they signed for certain legal reasons or strategic moves, and then responses by lawyers to lawyers calling each other out. That's going to be this afternoon, because right now we're going to discuss I don't know if it's breaking news. I don't know if it's sources say. I don't know if it's confirmed, but it seems to all be pointing to the fact that maybe there will be no preliminary hearing for Brian Kohberger in June, but instead he will be indicted by a grand jury, or already has been indicted by a grand jury. That's the other interesting part about this. This could have already happened and we don't know. And it seems like we might find out more Monday, May 22nd, which is a date we already know everybody's available, because we're supposed to have that scheduling conference on that day. And when immediate things pop up, it just so happens that lawyers and clients and everybody ends up being available, which is part of the media's argument when they were saying, why do we have to wait so long to just schedule the hearing to see if this gag order is legit or not? And I actually think there may be some crossover with the delay in making a decision in the gag order so that it can't even go up to the Supreme Court in time. There may be some connection to that with this grand jury proceeding happening, the preliminary hearing going away, and potentially us moving forward with the real criminal case May 22nd. So a bunch of different things to talk about with this. So hit that like button if you just got here. Nobody probably knows about this live. This was not planned. Anybody that missed the live, I apologize. We did not have any time to plan it. I saw it this morning, literally laying in bed, everybody tagging me in tweets. Follow us, Tragos Law, on Twitter, because this is how I find out a lot of this stuff. I don't have sources. I don't have my ear to the ground, interviewing people involved with Brian Kohberger. I have the chat, I have all the people out there that just have questions about this process. And when you have questions, I like to give answers where I can, right? And that's how we're here. So if you like that, subscribe to our channel as well. So what does this mean? It means a couple different things. First, if he is indicted by the grand jury, there will be no preliminary hearing. Okay. I think everybody understands that at this point. We've kind of beat that point to death. But what if the state loses at the grand jury? Can they then go to preliminary hearing? Well, the answer is no, not on these charges, not on this case, because it will actually be dismissed. But that is not a victory for Brian Kohberger, because the state can refile these same charges or new charges with new or different or additional evidence, and then they can start this process over again. They can choose a preliminary hearing. They can choose a grand jury. So there's no real risk to the state here. And that's why we talked about what evidence will they produce? What will they not produce? What are they going to hold close to the vest? Do they really want to show Brian Kohberger and his team exactly how they're going to present everything? Because we've talked about data dumps and discovery, 10,000 pages, 51 terabytes. But in the preliminary hearing, at least some of that would have been honed down for them to show what they're going to use and how they're going to use it. Well, now that's gone. There's no need to play it close to the vest with the grand jury, because those proceedings are done in secret. We won't know what happens. At least usually we don't know what happens. Sometimes in Murdoch, things come out where we find out they said something to the grand jury that might not have been true. And you remember Dick Harpootlian questioning one of the law enforcement officers about that and about the grand jury proceedings. Now, certain judges won't let you ask any questions about it, but we may never know what's ever presented in front of the grand jury. And while we talked about what would happen if the state lost there or no probable cause was found, that is very, very unlikely. The chances of the state losing or not having the grand jury find probable cause and getting their indictments is slim to none. So I would expect, if it hasn't happened yet, that the grand jury will in fact move for an indictment or rule or vote for an indictment, probable cause for the indictment. And that's what we will probably be hearing on May 22nd. Now, some timing. with the gag order. And actually, I have something from a tweet from one of the people we love here that I'm going to show here that is actually some evidence that this is probably happening based on the record. And we're going to play that in a second. But when it comes to the gag order, the media has been trying to push this. They say irreparable harm is being done. And they say that we need to know this stuff. The public needs to know this stuff. While the preliminary hearing may be done in secret, this entire case shouldn't be done in secret. And the state and the defense are like, oh, come on, there's not irreparable harm. We've got an expert to talk about how this is affecting the case. Let's keep delaying it. Both sides basically don't want to have this hearing yet on May 22nd. And to me, the fact that this is all happening while they're making these same arguments may be indicative that they knew this was coming. And while it's done in secret, the defense does know about the process. Sometimes they'll even tell us, if it's a case like this, hey, we're going to go to the grand jury. So we may know, even though we can't be in there, we can't object. We do get information that happens there. We do get some transcripts of what happens there. There is some stuff that we do know about what happens and what they present to the grand jury. That's part of the discovery process. But the public is not hearing anything about this, and they don't know anything about this, which just makes me think it's already done. If the public is starting to know, my guess is it's already done. And the fact that the gag order is being extended, and now we're going to have a hearing scheduling a motion to argue about the gag order potentially on the same day that we are going to hear that Bryan Kohberger was in fact indicted by a grand jury. There are official charges. That's very interesting to me. And I don't like to call shenanigans or shadiness or things like that with the court. And I'm not saying that's what's going on here. But the timing is very strange to me, especially because the state and probably the defense know that this is happening. And that's what I kind of think is the interesting part about the gag order. And what else happens on May 22nd if the grand jury does, in fact, find probable cause and he is indicted on May 22nd? Well, that starts the clock for a speedy trial. If Bryan Kohberger does, in fact, demand a speedy trial, the clock will start on May 22nd. So when we get to situations like the grand jury versus the preliminary hearing, from the beginning, he could have demanded a speedy preliminary hearing, which maybe it would have happened that way, or maybe they just would have done the grand jury sooner. But by waiving his right to a speedy preliminary hearing, it extended this discovery period. And we know that discovery's been going on. We know that the state has been provided new reports. We know that there's still reports being analyzed by the lab and giving them to the state. So the state is getting new information over these months since Bryan Kohberger was arrested, when they pushed the preliminary hearing out a few months. So they got this new information, potentially brought it to the grand jury, and now they're going to use that information to indict. And to me, I think all of that's interesting, but that's not something that Bryan Kohberger and his lawyers didn't know could happen. It's not a surprise, and there's nothing wrong with the state doing this. They didn't break any rules. They didn't violate anybody's constitutional rights. This is the way it works in Idaho: grand jury or preliminary hearing. They set the preliminary. And here's another thing. So many different things have been filed and pushed with this gag order, this non-dissemination order, the media interest, the public interest, people guessing, people speculating, pontificating, whatever it may be. Maybe they said, you know what, screw it. We don't want to have this preliminary hearing. We don't want to have the fight over whether or not cameras are going to be in the courtroom right now. Let's kick that can down the road. Let's do the grand jury and just move on. And depending on what the evidence is, maybe the defense knew about it. If the evidence was going to be so grotesque and damning to Bryan Kohberger, maybe the defense was like, just do the grand jury, because that's in secret. There's no issues with the media. Nobody even has an opportunity to come sit in there and see that. Because before we have the preliminary hearing in 1 month, you better believe we were going to have motions and hearings and fights about whether or not cameras and audio equipment was going to be in that courtroom for the preliminary hearing. So I think all of that was taken into account when we talk about why this happened and the timing of this happening. But what's also interesting, we know that the state has not provided at least some of the things defense has asked for, at least from the defense's perspective. They have asked multiple interrogatory questions and requests for production. That was, the documents weren't produced or the answers weren't given. So they felt like they needed to file a motion to compel. The state has responded. The judge has not made a decision on those yet. But that could come into play when we talk about a speedy trial. If the defense took these months to try to gather documents and figure out what's going on and what the state has, they've definitely learned a lot because they've been provided thousands and thousands of documents. But if they don't feel like they've gotten enough, maybe they'll waive his right to a speedy trial, which they don't have to do now. And if I was them, I wouldn't. I would demand a speedy trial. You can always waive it later. But that'll be an interesting concept to me and to see what happens. So let's take a look at something that was interesting that I think gives us a pretty good idea that this is going to happen by grand jury. And this is a tweet from Sleuthy Goosey. She sent this to me. A bunch of other people tagged me in her tweet. So the event date and time, June 30th at 9 a.m. The event status is canceled. The event type is preliminary hearing. So that's a pretty good indication that the preliminary hearing is not happening on June 26th to the 30th. So if they've canceled the preliminary hearing already, either both sides had to agree to that, or at least Brian Kohberger had to agree to that. And they would need to set a new hearing date, which is possible and something that could be happening. But what's more likely is we don't need a preliminary hearing because he's being indicted by the grand jury. And then what else is interesting here is on page 2, not one motion hearing, not 2 hearings, but 3 hearings are now set on May 22nd. Now, I didn't go back and check this before. I know we had that scheduling conference set. I don't know how they said it. I don't know if they said it like this already or if these are new. But it seems to me that these are new. And we are going to have 3 hearings on May 22nd. Now, the gag order, the non-dissemination stuff, that does not go away. That does not go away just because they indicted him with a grand jury and set a preliminary hearing. But it looks like we're having 3 hearings, and I would guess at least 2 of them are arraignment, telling him what he's charged with and what the grand jury found an indictment for. Number 2, the scheduling conference to schedule when we're going to have this hearing about the gag order with the media and the Gonsalves family. But what is the third one? What is the third one? I don't know. Will there be a camera at the May 22nd hearing? That's a good question. So they had cameras and audio at the last hearing when they read him what he was arrested for. So I think it is possible they'll have a camera in the courtroom. And if they do, we're going to be there. We're going to be watching it. So I thought that was interesting. John the Vague One, Cup of Joe and the Lawyer You Know. Ooh, I like that. Georgia Klein's new member. Welcome. Yeah. Lulu, according to Jennifer Coffindaffer, he has been indicted via grand jury. That wouldn't surprise me based on the timing, but I haven't seen that. It hasn't come through the public record yet. So I think I'm okay saying I think this is what happened. Could be right, could be wrong. 8:29 in Malaysia, PM. Yeah, I see a bunch of people saying that this is a good time for them. Well, it wasn't planned. I don't usually do it. Usually Wednesday mornings, I have a nice stretching routine and hit some golf balls, work on my swing, but today we're hanging out instead. Tom, Peter, Nicole Wheeler, Nicole Mobley, and Azam. Never miss these. The chat, LOL. Amazing community. Yeah, it's funny because it's like you actually do start to get to know people because a lot of the same people are in the chat all the time, hanging out, talking, which I think is fun. Like, I think it's great if I ever watch these back, which I never do, but sometimes I watch the chat while I'm talking, or I'll have John or somebody else that's watching the chat tell me it's like the chat's just kind of talking amongst themselves, asking questions, answering questions. How you doing? How you been? How you feeling with this? Doing life together a little bit, people going through stuff, talk about it. So I think that's kind of a nice indication of it ain't all business. So thank you, Tom, for bringing it to my attention and letting us shout it out. Yeah, Steve, yoga with Peter in the morning. That would be nice. But I would think I would need to be on the other side of the screen watching somebody tell me the right poses and moves to do. And Chopper said she's a main member on another channel, but this is her second favorite. So I'm glad you're here, Chopper. All right. So yes, how is everyone this morning? Patrick Mott. I've got about 3 minutes left before I have to leave. It's 8:30 now my time. You guys are all the best. All the people that are in here make it what it is. And that's what makes it interesting. And again, you come and call on Twitter, put the bat signal up, tag me on stuff, and Instagram. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram because we're about 500 followers away from 20K. And then we're giving out some new merch from the new merch store that just launched this month. So I want to just hit a couple key points before we bounce. Number one, the state did nothing wrong by indicting Brian Kohberger via the grand jury. It's always an option, grand jury or preliminary hearing. Number two, nothing happens by coincidence. The timing and the way things are done are deliberate decisions made by all the parties involved. And in this situation, the state. They know what's going on with the defense. They know what's going on with the gag order. They know what's going on with the judge. They know the timing of all this. They know what speedy trial is. They know what they've turned over to the defense. They know what they haven't turned over. So everything is deliberate. And they probably have a reason for this. Maybe they just think it's going to be a cleaner way, a more private way, and a higher chance at success way of doing business. Number three, whether it was a grand jury or a preliminary hearing, the chances of probable cause being found against Brian Kohberger or for these charges and for these charges to continue forward in a criminal case were very, very high. Whether it was a judge or a grand jury with no defense there, probable cause was always likely to be found, and this case was always likely to move forward. Now, what does it do for timing? May 22nd has now become a big date. June 26th has gone away. A lot of people marked that on their calendar. Hopefully you didn't have travel plans to go watch this. But the next decision that's important to me that I can't wait to hear is, will he demand a speedy trial? Will he wait? Will we not hear? Will he waive it? Those are the three options. Either you demand it, you waive it, or you just wait and don't say anything, which means you're still going to decide sometime soon. So that to me is what I'm most looking forward to here in the coming days. And we did a deep dive on speedy trial in Idaho for Lori Vallow, if anybody wants to check that out. Can you explain exactly what a grand jury is, Summer? So it's basically, the rules are a little more lax than a trial, but you pick a jury, the state goes on, the state presents evidence, they can read deposition transcripts, they can read police reports, they can show pictures, they explain the case, their theory of the case, why they think it's Brian Kohberger. Then they can present some Giglio or Brady evidence, which can be exculpatory evidence. They can present some of the defense evidence if they want, but it's the state presenting it, where they could say, there are a lot of these Elantras, but we believe it is Brian Kohberger's for this reason or that. And then the grand jury makes a decision, and it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's finding probable cause for these crimes. And if they find probable cause that Brian Kohberger is the person that committed these crimes, they come back with a yes, basically. We broke this down as well with Deshaun Watson, where the grand jury actually came back with no charges in multiple jurisdictions in Texas for battery against Deshaun Watson, the quarterback of the then Houston Texans, now Cleveland Browns. So that was a time where the grand jury actually didn't find probable cause and didn't come back with any charges, which is the exception, not the rule. But it's a normal kind of jury trial type of proceeding with more laxed rules. and the rules of evidence are not as strict. More stuff can come in during the grand jury proceedings than can come in a trial. They basically hear a one-sided argument and they make their call. Valerie Orr, hope your daughter had a wonderful birthday. She did. 10 years old. It's wild to me. Wild. Victoria Powell, we're going to end on this. Good morning. Alex and his lawyers up to the shenanigans with the Satterfield Suns? Yes, they are. That's going to be our afternoon live. So if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Hit that bell. I think around 3 o'clock this afternoon, Eastern time, we're going to go through the motion that Murdoch's lawyers filed and the response from Bland Richter. That's going to be interesting. So make sure you check us out there. Hit that like button on the way out so anybody that's catching up later this morning can see that this video exists. Come get some answers. Hopefully we will for sure be talking about this more. I thought this was going to be a slow week, but Kohberger is exploding. So we will continue to talk about this stuff, especially when you guys have questions. I love you all. Thank you for joining me, having a cup of joe with the lawyer you know. Until this afternoon, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Tragos Law is our handle. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos.